Hey there, welcome back to another episode of our podcast. Today we have a very special guest joining us to talk about reptiles, exotic animals, and everything in between. Please give a warm welcome to Dillon.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. And I'll tell you right now, there's a reason that we'll talk about my podcast probably later, but there's a reason that I don't record a live intro with my guests because I can't do what you just did. Even though it sounds like a sentence or two, it's simple. There's a pressure to say every word right, and I always record things after. So well done on the intro.
Oh, thank you so much. It's I don't know how I'm good at it, but I think I just put the pressure out of my head and just go, okay, let's just do it.
Yeah.
And then I'm getting good at this. I'm a natural.
You're a natural. It's very good.
Not to sound like, it's so much fun. And I've not to fangirl too much, but I've been listening to your podcast for a while. Been quite a big fan. So it's quite an honor to have you on, especially so early, as I've already said to you before we started recording. So tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, it's an honor to be here. I love supporting new shows, and I do remember 6 years ago being in your shoes, kind of just starting out and being nervous. So I'm happy to be here. As far as myself, my name's Dillon. I have the podcast Animals at Home podcast. Some people may be aware of it. I live in Canada, in Manitoba, which is the center province there, and I've always been fascinated with animals my entire life, not just reptiles and amphibians, but really everything. And I growing up in Manitoba, for those who are unaware, it's a very cold climate in the winter, so we don't have a ton of herpetofauna here, but we do have garter snakes and different toads and frogs and whatnot. And so I've always interacted with those as a child. And then at some point later on, I had the classic many different types of pets, rats, fish, birds, and eventually I landed on reptiles sometime around 2007, and that's when I got my first crested gecko. And so that was my kind of introduction to reptile keeping. But I never really got serious about reptile keeping until much later, probably 2015, 2016, when I started adding a few animals to my collection, and then kind of, started to learn more about how to care for things properly. And originally I was just sort of the kid with a pet, and then I started taking it a lot more seriously kind of in the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, that's another thing that you like to promote, same as me. Education and putting out content and helping people learn, especially when they get their first reptiles or they're thinking of getting a reptile, which is really important. And it's important to approach it in a friendly way as well, so that people will really take what you say. And if I don't know about it, then I'll know someone who does. So just being a sort of source for people to be able to go to and be like, hey, I need help with this, or what would you do for this? So it's very important to, I mean, this podcast is sort of about, we've got different types of people who do different things, including conservation, preservation, but education is a really important thing to me. So
yes, reptiles themselves, there's so many issues with them as a group because of how rugged many of them are. They can handle really tough care, and how little you can do with them care wise, and them to just kind of continue to live. And so it's tough because they do fall into kind of an impulse buy type purchase for people, I think, and many people end up with reptiles early on. Maybe they got it as a gift or for birthday or for Christmas, and because they were really fascinated by it, but then the education's not there to really support them and help them through that. Now, fortunately, reptiles will give you time because of how rugged they are to sort of learn how to care for them better. But there's sort of that shift between, like, a comparison would be like hermit crabs. Hermit crabs are very much a walk into the store, leave with a little shell that looks like a soccer ball, and the thing's going to die in a year.
I've seen even like beach sides that you can buy them in some places. I've seen a couple of videos about that recently. I think a friend of mine actually posted it, and they come with just a little, just plastic container thingy, and it's like $3 for $5 or something. It's crazy. There's no, do you know how to look after it? Just this is a living creature that you are just. I mean, and it is easy to impulse buy because, you're having a good day at the beach, you're in good spirits, oh, that would be cool to to get something. Oh, it's cheap, you know. And yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of damaging places like that, you know, paint the shells as well, which is really bad for them, and don't yeah, it's very harmful to the poor little guys.
Yeah, so you end up buying a pet kind of for the wrong reason. Just like you said, it's this sort of interesting thing. You're at the beach, you're having a fun time, and the reptile industry, I don't think, is as bad as that because the accessibility is not quite as crazy as finding them in a hut on the beach. But people
Yeah,
will
no, that
walk
was
into a
a
pet
very
store.
random example.
No, but I mean that does happen. You can I've seen hermit crabs for sale at like a kiosk in a mall type thing where people are. It's like buying gum at the store. Like you're just like, oh, I kind of want that. Let's take it home.
Yeah, it's just
Where
it's easy. I think that
it's
the ease of it as well is another thing, that it's just
exactly.
like, and the as I said, like 3 for $5 or 2 for $5 or whatever it was. Oh, that's cheap. You know, I don't need
Yes.
to. I've got no care information about it, so I'm guessing it could just stay in this little plastic tub thing.
Yeah. And so
Crazy.
reptiles, it's not as bad as that, but it's kind of close to that. Where if you were to walk into a pet store and you can't really impulse buy a fish because you can't leave with just the fish because you know that intuitively you know that you need a pump and an aquarium and you need a whole setup. Where with a reptile,
You
you
would
could
hope.
actually leave with yeah. You hope that they're not going to leave with the bag and assume that that's okay. Most people probably won't do that, but you could potentially do that with a reptile. You could think, oh, I have an old fish tank at home in my shed. I'll buy this snake and I'll throw it in there, and immediately I have a pet. So there's that's the tricky part about the reptile hobby is that I think it's very important to give people the right information. And yeah, you can't stop impulse buying, but can you educate people
Yeah,
and give them the tools to improve the welfare of the animals that they do end up with?
I'm just seeing there's a lot of things that could sort of segue into our questions that, you know, how can we ensure that our reptiles living environment is both comfortable and stimulating? I think that's a good way, because then we've got questions that can lead on from there, as we're talking
Yes.
about care and everything. So
So the way I would always start with this question is encourage people to have a decent idea of where that animal comes from on the planet. That can be another challenge, right? Because people walk into a store, they want to just buy an animal. They don't think about that the leopard gecko comes from, Pakistan and India, or the crested gecko comes from New Caledonia. They just buy it. And if you use their wild setting and their wild habitat and where they come from in situ as a guide, you can actually do a lot of beneficial changes to your enclosure to make sure that their environment is comfortable and stimulating. You're not trying to replicate their environment exactly, but you're trying to replicate features of their natural environment in the enclosure. You could do that with, for example, you see people using like PVC branches where they have a whole network of branches for arboreal species. That works
yeah,
because that animal can climb and it wants to climb. But if you don't know where the animal comes from in nature, it's really tough to build an enclosure, build an environment in a captive setting that will give them that stimulation. Like these animals are hardwired to do certain things, whether it's climbing, digging, basking, burrowing, whatever it is. They all have these sort of natural behaviors interwoven into their DNA, and they will use those things if you provide them. But if you don't look at their natural habitat, you have no
lost you. If you
clue.
can hear me still.
Oh yeah. Sorry, I can still
Oh,
hear
you're
you.
back.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
know if you lost.
I think I did.
Okay,
Your
good.
yeah.
Okay, I tend.
I can hear
we're
you
gonna
now. Yeah.
we're gonna overlap each other again. Yeah. Yeah, sorry. Do continue. Sorry. About the arboreal species and how to replicate that. And
Yeah, exactly. So, if you look at their natural setting, you can replicate elements of that because the animals are hardwired to do certain things, right? It's interwoven into their
mm,
DNA to be a digger or a swimmer or a climber, whatever it is. And you don't have to teach them to do those things. But if you don't provide those elements, then the animal is never going to display those behaviors for you. And that will lead to an animal that doesn't have a stimulating environment.
yeah, and it's so important as well to do that for them, because they will be completely different animals if
Totally.
they're, and a lot of people, if they're not aware, they just think, oh, this lizard or whatever it is, oh, he's so chill, he's just. And there's quite a difference between an animal being chill and calm around you, and an animal that's just not getting enough stimulation and thriving in its environment. I mean, I want to do a lot more bioactive. I've sort of got, not fully, I mean, I've got some plants and stuff in a couple of the frogs, You know, the ones that open up nicely like that they can sort of sit in, and you
Mm.
know, that kind of thing. But I think bioactive is just awesome. And yeah, like building your own enclosures. I'm terrible at DIY, but I am still sort of watching YouTube videos and that kind of thing, because it's great to watch as well. It's entertaining to watch. But yeah, no, I want to do all of my enclosures fully bioactive, and just have, yeah, loads of climbing opportunities, and you know, things. People do some amazing things. They really do, yourself included, really.
Yeah, and that is really a fun part of the hobby, is being able to build and work with your hands and create an environment for your animal. I personally think that is the most fun you can have within the
It
reptile
is,
keeping world,
yeah.
is creating an environment. It doesn't mean you have to go out and get the table saw out and build an enclosure, but just the
Yeah.
act of actually building the inside, right? Creating the environment for the animal with its natural habitat in mind, because that's really fun too. You can go online, you can look at weather patterns, you can look at pictures of that area and try to come up with something in your mind that you want to replicate and then implement it. And then you get to watch your animal and see how they act. Are they doing the thing that you were hoping they would do with that thing? And if not, maybe you can make a small adjustment here and there. And that's the sort of the give and take with the hobby that is keeps it engaging and keeps it fun and protects you from impulse buying new animals over and over and over again.
Because it's expensive as well. To I mean, there's so many elements of, you know, the lighting, the even food. It could be like, if it's a savanna monitor or a larger lizard that will obviously eat more and bigger sort of things than just, you know, their normal diet. um I think, yeah, when you were saying about someone that could go and buy a snake and put it in an old fish tank, they don't realize, like, you know, substrate and lighting and UV and all of this kind of stuff, which it does add up. It does.
Yes.
I think if I guess we've sort of covered this already, but do you want to say anything else about it?
I think a good rule of thumb for people is providing their animal choice. So, however you do that, whether you're making sure that you have a lot of different options in the enclosure for the animal to choose where it wants to bask or dig or hide, and even choose to come out of its enclosure if you're somebody that lets your animal roam around the room, those sort of things, rather than reaching in and yanking the enclosure out, or yanking the animal out of the enclosure. Can you open the door and let the animal come out on its own and investigate the world around it? That is really good mental stimulation for your animal. It's not great mental stimulation for your animal if you go in and you reach and
Yeah, you're
drag the
just,
animal
yeah,
out.
you don't give them the choice. Yeah.
Yeah, and now they're panicked and they're like in a new room and they're just kind of scurrying around and they're scared. That's not good mental enrichment. But mental enrichment that allows them to explore a new territory safely, I think is
Yeah,
that
and
is
when they
what
get
mental
excited
enrichment
about
is.
it, like when they
Mm,
feel comfortable enough to get excited, like my Chinese water dragon, he'll be like, he'll see that, you know, he's going to come out and he's like, yes, I could climb on more stuff, even though he's got lots to climb on. He loves jumping from like the branches into the water. Um,
yes, yeah,
but yeah, he did that with me earlier when I was feeding him. He was just like, he was very excited.
yeah, and that's perfect.
Obviously
He's not
with,
scared and
with
he
the
gets
food.
to experience new things.
Yeah, no, it's yeah, I just love them. I mean, I know I've not just got reptiles, like I've got rodents and amphibians and that kind of thing as well. So it's yeah, they are a pleasure to have. Um, so what are some common mistakes that reptile owners make when it comes to their care?
Um, Well, if I were to ask a vet that question, they would tell me dehydration is a big one. So vets typically see a lot of kidney issues and and health illness issues related to lack of moisture and water. So I would say that's a big one. Again, we're working with animals that have the capacity to go like months or weeks or months depending on the species without water. But fresh water is
Yeah,
just so key for care. So even if you have it, anybody who's really serious about keeping aired animals and they do it correctly will provide water dishes and clean water and fresh water. So that's a big one, making sure that the
yeah, I've
water
heard
is
that.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, they don't. My bearded dragon doesn't need a fresh bowl of water every day, or this and
Hmm.
that. And it's like, well, it's better to have it and them to not use it than for them not to have it at
Yes.
all. So yeah, Is there
And I
any?
would also say I would say space is another one, and space is hard
Yes.
because enclosures come at a certain size. You go to the store, you buy your 36-inch enclosure, whatever. But and there's a lot of kind of myths within the hobby that certain animals don't do well with larger spaces, but you can do a lot with a larger space, even with a smaller animal, provided that you set it up properly, and that gives your animal more ecological niches within that enclosure that it can choose from. So space is an important one. So we tend to see a lot of people gravitating towards smaller spaces, which an animal can live in, and they'll continue to their heart will continue to beat. But is it the best for them? Probably not. You could probably give them more mental and physical enrichment by giving them more space. So I would say that's another big one. We tend to be very conservative, especially in
Definitely.
North America with our enclosure sizes. So there's more room there. Uh, Lighting is another one that seems to be getting better. A lot of people are providing more full spectrum light, and we don't see as much metabolic bone disease anymore. Another one I would say is overfeeding. We see a lot of overweight
Yeah.
animals, especially
Yeah.
snakes, but also lizards as well, but especially snakes because typically the prey items we feed are very fatty, and you're dealing with lab rats essentially. So people are way overfeeding those animals. So that's another big one.
Yeah, because in the wild, they're almost like emaciated. Some species are, what we would consider to be, if you saw it in captivity, like, oh god, that lizard's really skinny, or that snake's really skinny. But it's just like, especially with the different seasons and everything, yeah, definitely overfeeding. Because I mean, it's common in any animal. I love my, like, I don't have a dog, but I mean, as an example, you often hear people say, I love my dog, I'm going to give it an extra treat, or this or
Mm.
that. And it's like, if you love them, you've got to give them treats by all means, but just within within the right sort of constraints of what they should have and what is good for them. And there's supplements as well, for reptiles. I think a lot of people aren't. It's the thing with the. I mean, it's one of those topics that always comes up. Always, it's certain larger scale American, Canadian pet stores that sell animals, with the people looking after them not usually knowing how to take care of them. So that's always a difficult one. I mean, it's common here as well, because it's cheaper to, minimum wage. It's cheaper to employ people that are younger, and that's all they care about. And
Mhm.
it's a shame because, yeah, it would be good. It would avoid so much if the people. I'm not saying like obviously every store ever, you know, but a lot of the times it's hard for people that do rescue or rehabilitation, that see the animals and go, I can't really buy it and help it, because if I do, it's just going to be replaced by an equally as sick one, most likely.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a very tough situation, and there are some benefits to the big box stores. They actually do really, in some ways, hold up the reptile hobby in general because of how much money gets funneled through that system. Without the big manufacturers being able to use the pet stores to make sales, they probably wouldn't exist. So that's like one thing, like Zoomed, for example, or Arcadia, or whoever, they'll use those large pet stores to make sales and to make their business thrive, which is benefits us because then we have high quality equipment. But it's so tough when you see an animal that clearly is going to end up in the wrong hands. So I don't really know how to fix that problem because again, you want the manufacturing companies to be able to utilize the big chain pet stores to make their sales in order to make sure that they're making enough money to support us with our higher level equipment. But how do you the like I said earlier, the most fun you have in the reptile hobby is designing the enclosure and doing all that kind of work. But if you're not in the hobby, the most fun is buying the animal and bringing it home in the little box that you get from the pet store. It's so
Which
hard
is
to over.
often short-lived anyway.
Yes, it's a very short-lived thing. You're going to be excited for that moment you bring it home. You're going to be excited for that first week, but then suddenly now you have a pet that you have to care for 20 years. So how do you educate the consumer at that point of sale that this is a much larger equipment, or a much larger commitment than you might think? I don't exactly know, but I do wonder if, and now the big chain pet stores probably wouldn't want to do this because they lose sales on animals, but could you put like a yearly budget associated. So let's say your leopard gecko is $98.99, whatever, the $100 for a leopard gecko. But then underneath that price tag, you might say like estimated cost of care for a 12-month period is X. And to sort of
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
make people understand that this is not and maybe a setup cost as well. This is, if you're buying
Yeah.
this animal, the setup cost is going to be $500. It's going to cost you $30 a month every month for the rest of its life. That sort of thing. That's the commitment you want people to understand when they buy those animals.
Yeah, I mean, it would, yeah, it just, it makes so much sense. You would think, just to do something like that would, I mean, even if they did it in a way that, I don't know, just was, it's so hard because you want to help them all, but at the end of the day, we do our best, and that's all we can do. And the ones that are helped because of people that of listening to like podcasts and seeing our content and that kind of thing, that's all we can do. So it's yeah, I think
exactly.
that's sort of, I mean, we've pretty much covered it, but I think another thing is animals that grow a lot larger, that are very small as babies as well. I was talking to Terence about this before, that because he's got loads of tortoises, a baby sulcata can be like that, pretty much that big when it's born, but it's the third biggest species of tortoise in the world. So a lot of people don't realize, even if it takes 15-20 years for them to get significantly bigger, a lot of people don't realize that. And then their tortoise table or whatever it is, they need a lot of room, they need a lot of stimulation, otherwise they'll just be destructive. And then
size and lifespan are the two major issues with keeping reptiles. I mean, size, like you said, that it's very tough to picture a hatchling sulcata, how big it's going to actually be at some point in the future. But I think it's even tougher to extrapolate long time, like long spans of time. If you go buy a ball python, you cannot plan for 30 years. Nobody can plan for 30 years. It's just not possible. I mean, like as your brain works, like maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, 30 years, you can't plan for 30 years. It's just actually impossible, because it's just there's way too many variables that happen in that amount of time for you to make any sort of plan. So when somebody buys a new reptile, they cannot honestly say that this animal is going to stay with them for their whole life. And I say that about mine. I hope that's true about my animals, but I can't possibly say that with 100% certainty, because who the hell knows what's going to happen. So that is a challenge. I mean, a lot of animals are going to live 20, 30 years, and you're selling them to people. Maybe you're selling them to a 10-year-old. Does that 10-year-old actually understand that when he's 40, maybe he'll have kids of his own, this animal is still going to be with him? Maybe, hopefully. I mean, that would be really cool. And I do hear stories about that. But
yeah, tortoises are basically an heirloom, aren't they? I mean,
exactly.
they'll be. I'll be getting my parents' tortoise, and it's just like you've got to have somewhere. Yeah, you've got to have. Who needs like priceless family jewelry when you can have a tortoise?
Exactly.
But yeah,
and that's actually okay, right? Like if you have the good setup, let's just say I have a tortoise. I don't, but let's just say I do. And then, I see my son as he gets older, maybe he becomes fascinated with it. I would be happy to have it in the will to him. And that's a fine setup. But is that going to be, does everybody have that setup or that situation? Probably not.
But
yeah. Yeah, I can see it now. Yeah, it's all good. I was able to finish my point. And plus, with my audio on my side, that you probably will be able to pull from that.
This is always a good one. Nutrition and ensuring that they're getting the right diet. I mean, it's the questions are sort of broad and sort of all but it's more to just make an organic conversation, I guess.
Yes.
So
well, I think it's a good point. I mean, I think most people intuitively will understand that better nutrition means better health, not even just for you, your animals, but also for you as a person. And one of the things that happens with pets is we become very cookie cutter with and that's part of a sales tactics. Like, you're buying this animal, here's its food. The food comes in this bag, and then you sprinkle it down. And this happens with dogs, cats, parrots, doesn't matter what animal, any rodents, you get the bag of food, and then there you go. and it becomes an easy sales transaction, it's not the best for the animal. And so there's many ready-made foods, whether it's dog food or gecko food or whatever it is. I'm not saying you shouldn't use those, but the best thing you can do for your animal is vary the diet and give them something else to eat. So even with snakes, I mean, it's so easy to just fill your freezer with rats and just continue to give them rats. But there's lots of different animals. Most animals, most snakes in the wild, for example, will eat a wide variety of different rodents, and they may also eat reptiles and birds, and some of them will eat fish as well. So if there's a way for you to mix in a few quail or a few chicks once in a while, or if you can get your hands on feeder reptiles, depending on the size of the animal you're feeding, that sort of thing, that's good. Or even just change the rodent type as well. If you're working with larger animals, you can do rabbits or African soft furs or whatever it is. There's different ways to mix up the diet, just A, for interest for the animal, but B, you're just going to pull different nutrients and different things from those food sources that are crucial for high well-being of an animal and longevity.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the supplements are quite important as well. A lot of people don't realize for if you've got the right UV for a tortoise, but you don't have, it's not getting its supplements, then that's not gonna do anything.
Yes, yeah. I like Arcadia supplements. I use the Earth Pro A, and they have a vitamin D optimized D. I think that's what's optimized D3. I think what it's called. So that's
I've pretty much got all of the the Arcadia supplements. So yeah.
So they're good
big
to
up
rotate.
Arcadia.
The website gives a good little supplement rotation for you to follow, so you can roughly follow that. That way you kind of know that you're doing that.
The feeding program. Yeah, I did a video about that actually.
Okay, perfect.
So yeah, and the lighting guide that's on there. I know they're gonna start branching out to the US and Canada a lot more, because a lot of people see my posts and they're kind of like they can't get the supplements or things more readily available. I know they're starting a new launch, but because it's very new, I don't want to say anything, my words, I've got to be really careful with my words. But definitely check Arcadia Reptile out. The US and the US and Canadian reptile keepers, because they do supply really high quality, long lasting lighting, supplements, food. Definitely recommend.
Yeah, agreed.
I mean, that kind of goes, that's one of the things that sort of goes into this. So yeah, Arcadia pretty good, because as I said, the lighting guide, you've got the feeding guide, you can type in any animal. On my profile as well, I've got the lighting guide, just a little summary of that pinned. So you just type in bearded dragon, and it will say what kind of UV it needs and the basking space, and it's really good.
Yes, yeah. It's very, very helpful, especially if you're a new owner and you're not exactly sure, and maybe you haven't invested in a solar meter, which no one would hold you fault for just because they're so expensive.
I was going to say, they're like 300 quid or something silly.
They're so expensive. Yeah, they're very expensive. And now I think they will pay for themselves for those who are wondering if they should buy one. If you have a lot of animals and you're running lots of bulbs, it be, like you said, their bulbs do last much longer than they advertise, obviously, because you don't want to over advertise how long the bulb lasts. But the solar meter allows you to not just replace the bulb every 6 to 12 months. You can actually see what the bulb is putting out, and then you can decide if you need to actually buy a new one or not. Arcadia's website is fantastic for a resource. I like weatherspark.com for looking at weather patterns and the precipitation and temperature and whatnot for the location of your animals. So that's a great website. And then also iNaturalist is amazing as well for those that don't use iNaturalist. And again, this is kind of doing some of the natural history research side to your husbandry. Go to iNaturalist. It's kind of a citizen science page. It's sort of like a social media platform for nature lovers, and people will see things in the wild. And it's amazing. So somebody might see something in the wild and they might not even know what it is. They'll just take a picture of it, and then some expert, a biologist or somebody will come and ID the species. But what it does is it allows you to see those animals in situ. It allows you to see them interacting with their wild environment. Sometimes it's a one that's been hit by a car or something, or it's in somebody's shed. So those aren't the best. But if you look through it enough, you'll actually start to see, okay, this is an animal that I'm starting to see a lot of them pictured by the water. That's interesting, or high up in trees, or whatever it is. So that's another really good resource. I'm trying to think what else. I mean, there's a few great Facebook groups. The Reptile Lighting Facebook group is really good for folks that have kind of basic questions. There's lots of information in those groups, as well as files that have really solid data for people. That's really good.
You can get some people that are less willing to help in the Facebook groups. I'll put it like that. But
yeah,
you're
I
always
would
going to
direct
get people like that. So
yeah, so that's why I always direct people to the files. Just, you don't necessarily have to
yeah,
post anything, or just search, because somebody's probably asked the question before. So use the search function,
yeah,
type your question
just
in.
a
You'll
little thing,
probably
because I thought I don't want someone to go into like a Facebook group and then someone like comes at them, because that's what does happen. It more often than it should. Again, but that's why people like us are here to educate and help
yes,
with
yeah,
a smile,
exactly. So
and we're not
you
going to
use the search.
judge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, use the search, look at the files. You should be able to get an answer through there. And another one that's, I think, really important, and it's not even something that I implement enough myself, but there's the local community around you is good. I think going to expos and interacting with other keepers, or going to your local herp meetings, herp society meetings, those sort of things are fun and beneficial, and just you get to connect with other people and ask questions, and
Yeah,
that's a
I
really
wish there was
important
more
thing.
stuff like that around where I am. I just live in a tiny town, and there's just like everything's such so far. Because I know there was the well, I went to the European Turtle Alliance conference. I think it
Oh,
was
cool.
back in. Oh, it was so much fun. Like, you've got to come to the next one. Met Chris and Casey Leone from Garden State
Yes.
Tortoise. Absolutely. Oh, they say I say this every time to every single person that I talk to about them, but yeah, they say don't meet your heroes, but they're just so lovely and down to earth, and just good people. And obviously I've got the interview on my profile with them, but it was so much more than that. I was saying to Anthony, um, it was so much more than that. Like, we discussed quite a few things, and they gave me a lot of their time. And yeah, Chris's presentation was awesome as well. I did do. I got excited every time. He obviously he mentioned the big names like Otis and Lakai, and I would be in the back going woo. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, they're great.
people like
They're
that.
really, really down to, like you said, down to earth, and just happy to chat. And that's what you'll find at a lot of these like reptile type things, is that people are just excited to chat about animals, and the reptile hobby does attract people who are different. And a lot of
Yeah,
times those people end up being alone, might be too strong of a word, but you end up becoming isolated. So whether you're already kind of an introverted person and you spend time at home, it can be very easy to just end up in your reptile room with your space, and going on the internet, and you get more and more shy, and then you're not
yeah,
interacting with people. And but you'll find is that if you go into a reptile expo, especially with like the hardcore reptile people, a lot of them are like that, and you just got to go out and hang out with them, and you realize like, oh, everybody's a little weird. It's actually okay to be weird here and just talk
yeah,
with people.
yeah.
And
No, it's such a good. I think especially like amphibian owners as well. You always get the sort of the more. I think frogs are quite a neurodivergent animal. I don't know. I feel like everybody that's neurodivergent just loves frogs.
Interesting.
Maybe that's why I love them so much. But
Yeah,
do
yeah.
you know what I mean? It's
Oh, I
just
mean, totally. You see it kind of across the board. I didn't really think it was like more on the frog side. But I don't keep frogs, so I don't interact with the frog keepers as much. So I'll take your word for it that there's another level there.
yeah. No, yeah. Frogs are cool. I do love them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are some signs to look out for that may indicate that our reptile is not thriving in its living environment?
Well, one thing that you had mentioned earlier that I think is a really good key is you'd mentioned some people can be tricked by oh, my animal is so chill, right? You're just
Yeah,
looking at it and it's listless. And a term that I learned from Lori Tarini, who's an amazing animal behavioralist, is learned helplessness. So an animal can just basically become depressed and realize that it doesn't matter what it does in its environment. It has so little control over what's going on, and it'll learn that. It will learn that there's nothing it can do. So it might as well just sort of give up and sit. I mean, yesterday I went down a rabbit hole of looking at like the SeaWorld situations, like all these. There's a few
Oh
people
no,
online
yeah,
that it's terrible. I mean, there's one.
it is.
I wish I could. His name's like the Walrus Whisperer. He's from Canada, and he was kind of a big part of shutting down the marine land that we had here. But anyway, his Instagram page has lots of drone footage of these animals in these kind of abandoned parks that are no longer allowed to operate, but the whales are still there. And they're just kind of like laying on the floor. Like it's very sad. They're in these little concrete pools.
Oh.
And so that's an animal that you can see is like totally depressed. And so anyway, to dial it back to reptiles, you want to watch your animal. Are they behaving naturally? Are they doing some of the natural
And again,
behaviors that
you can just go to YouTube, pop in, you know, crested gecko in the wild, and then
yes,
you can sort of, you know, see that, or just like naturalistic behaviors in X animal, and then you
exactly.
can see sort of again build ideas, enrichment ideas. It's just like a full circle of
Yeah.
joyous education.
Exactly. Is your animal hunting? Is it foraging? Is it swimming? Are you making sure that it's drinking water? So that's a big thing, making sure that the animal is active and doing the right types of activity, because an overactive animal is also not good. So the other type of behavior that you want to watch for is pacing. And animals that pace the glass or glass surf up and down, up and
I
down,
was
up
going
and
to say,
down.
yeah, glass surfing, yeah.
Yeah, that's what we call a stereotypy. That's an animal that's expressing some stress and showing it through its behavior. So sometimes, depending on the species that you're working with, sometimes all that animal needs is an half an hour or an hour out of its enclosure to explore. And I have a female boa. She's just over. You probably can't see her. She's just over this shoulder. She's just basking here. 9 times out of 10,
Yeah,
she's fine. Sometimes she'll basically let me know that she wants out. She'll go up and down the glass, and I'll just open up the door. And sometimes I'll open up the door, and that's all she wants. It's just the door open, and she'll just put her chin on the tracks where the glass normally is, and she'll just sit
yeah.
there. Other times she'll come out, and I just set a timer on my phone to just repeat every 20 minutes so I don't forget her out. So like I'll let her roam out around here for 2 or 3 hours, but I'll put this timer on so I don't go upstairs and like leave and then go, oh my God, I left the snake out. So it just constantly goes like 20 minutes to ding, go check on her. And then after that, she'll go back into her enclosure, and she'll be totally relaxed and fine for weeks. So that's, I mean, sometimes I just need this like short exposure of something more interesting. So anyway,
Or
those are some things.
they don't feel like they've got enough places to hide maybe and feel safe, that they
Exactly.
can sort of hide away from you, and well, not you specifically, but you and everything. That's, oh, this is my safe place. That's
Yes.
great.
Yeah. There's a natural
And
instinct to explore, I think.
yeah, and then the need to, because a lot of people, I saw a thing on I think it was TikTok earlier that said, well, if there's loads of branches and stuff in there, like I won't be able to see my animal. And it's kind of like that's kind of the point.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The
With
blacking out the
some, yeah,
sides, like that's a, this enclosure here. I just put that static cling on it. It's a clear, it's a glass enclosure, but yeah, I'm not going to have as much visual access to the snake that's in there. But it's also a very visual snake, and if I come down the stairs too fast, he'll bolt himself back into his hide. So there's things that I can do to make him feel more secure and feel like he's not
yeah.
under threat all the
And
time.
it's not expensive to get that kind of thing, and it's
No.
fairly, it's pretty easy to put on yourself. Like a self-confessed terrible DIY person like myself could, I think I could manage.
You could
But
manage that
yeah,
one. You just spray water and stick
yeah.
it on it, or just go buy like construction paper from the dollar store and cut it out and tape it on. I mean, I've done that as well. Did I lose you? Can you hear me?
Oh,
Oh, I think you're back.
you sound like a robot.
Hello, hello, hello.
Is it back? Yeah, I was like, you were like robot. You were like, do, do, do.
Okay, yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, I could see you blinking. I'm like, is she there? But I think it was just the
Yeah, are
the
you
way
back?
it was glitching. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, I found that. I was like, I blink so much when is it because I'm so like stimulated by the conversation? I'm just like so into it that that's like my, I don't know, but yeah, I was looking back at the first episode and I was like, well, now everyone's gonna now everyone's gonna like notice it. But
It's
yeah,
probably not. It's one of
it's
those things
so
where
much.
you probably think of it, you're like, oh my God, everyone's going to notice me blinking, but you probably will be the only one that will notice.
Probably until now, I've just
Yeah.
like outed myself. But yeah, no, but podcasts are like, I don't know, it's just so much fun. It's basically like what you were saying about meeting other like-minded people that have the same passions and love and everything for the same thing, and how we can help each other and like make like my face was hurting when I with the pod with the episode with Anthony. My face was hurting because I was smiling. I was constantly smiling and like laughing, and we were having such a good time. And I find podcasts quite comforting as well. If like I often will listen to like to an episode of yours, like obviously you've got quite a lot, so I'm not through all of them yet. But if I need to do something, or if I find myself I can't quite concentrate on, I just need something in the background that I can listen to, but also not feel too like pressured by, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
It's nice to have that even though you're still listening, you just feel like it's just yeah. Because I often will be like, why go outside with people when you can inside with animals? Like I say that to people all the time. I'm just like, obviously, yeah, surround yourself with the right people. But
Yes. Yeah.
it
Yeah.
can, as you said, be very easy to get yourself sort of stuck in a rut of staying inside. Me being one of those people, like it's hard for people to believe. This is another thing I say quite often, because they're like, what, you're so outgoing and you're so like good with people, and I I find it like I need to recharge. It takes me a long time to recharge afterwards, like especially if I'm really enjoying myself, because it's quite a lot of energy to,
Yes.
and then yeah. But I'm so glad that I started it, because it's it's just been so much fun, and I'm like right at the beginning of my journey of podcasting. And how did you feel at the beginning of yours? Did you feel the
Definitely
same,
terrified.
or
Yeah. Yeah. I
terrified?
was, yeah, I enjoyed it, but I was also quite terrified. I felt like I really had no business doing a podcast. You do all those like imposter syndrome type things. And yeah, you just, like you said, you just get the ball rolling, you start having conversations with people, and you realize once the conversation started, you're having fun, and at the end of each recording, you're like, "Oh man, that was fun. I could do that again."
Yeah.
So there was definitely like a fear, and but I just kind of plowed through that as best I could, to the point where eventually you become comfortable behind the mic and doing these things, and kind of getting through some of that imposter syndrome, which is very, it can be pretty potent feeling at the beginning. But
Mm.
yeah, I'm glad that I worked through that, because like I just like you, it's so much fun. I learn a lot from my guests. I really do enjoy giving people information that they can utilize, stuff that they can implement into their room and immediately impact the benefit of or immediately benefit the animals that they keep. I think that's really
Mm.
crucial. And when I think about like 2015, 2016, when I kind of started getting more serious about reptile keeping, that was one of the things that I had noticed. I wasn't a content creator at all, but I had noticed the classic like Craigslist kind of classified situation where there's lots of animals on there that are not looking very
Yeah.
well. And
Mm.
that was kind of a concern. Like, what are we doing? Like, this hobby seems like it's an amazing hobby. We're working with amazing animals, but a lot of them seem to be falling into the wrong hands. So it's strange now, kind of 8 or 9 years later, whatever it is, 6, 7 years later, that my content is one of the things that people will point other people to try to thwart that welfare issue. And that's an exciting thing for me. It's almost like a full circle experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been
Yeah,
really
no,
fun.
it's a big achievement. I hope that I'm sort of end up one of those people that can, yeah, just help. And yeah, and I think it's nice, because you do end up kind of becoming friends with the person, like even if you're like all the way over in Canada, or you know it's it's nice to have that feeling of friendship.
Totally.
And yeah, no, it's surreal as well, because obviously we're recording now, so maybe I'll tell you a sneak peek of some of the guests. I'll DM you later, but
Sure.
it's a bit surreal when you get some people, again, like yourself, or just other people that have said yes to me, and I'm just like, is this real? Or like,
Yeah.
is this happening? Like, and it's great because it's a great way to for people to sort of recognize you as a not really a creator, but I mean the educator is obviously like my what I'm aiming for. But then creator and educator are kind of like, this the same. I can't think of what the expression is. I want to say the two ends of a stick, but that makes absolutely no sense. But
Yeah.
that's not
No, I
some
know what
weird
you mean.
British. That's not some weird British saying. That's just I can't think of two sides of the same. No,
Same coin.
I don't.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you
I don't know
mean. They work
if that's
tandem
right in that
together.
context. Yeah,
Yes, yeah.
yeah. So yeah, it's a good way, and even you just sharing the announcement of the podcast yesterday gets people interested, and it's when I sort of get to when I've got a bigger following, and when people are using my content as education and things, I'm going to do exactly the same. Like if someone says, oh, I'd like Alex and all her animals on my podcast, I'd be like, yeah, I'm down for it, because you're passing it down, like
Exactly.
and it's also like it's quite a relief as well, because everyone kind of says, yeah, when I started I was terrified, and uh I didn't know what to do. But I'm thinking, like, I don't find this sort of side of it as intimidating. I find not intimidating, as overwhelming. I'm trying to figure out now that, because you do you're every 2 weeks, aren't you? You release, I think.
It depends. Like I was pretty good with started every 2 weeks when I first released the show. I did that for a couple
Yeah.
years, and then I moved to once a week, and I did that for a long time. And then 2 years ago my son was born, so it kind of stretched it out to now it's about every 7 to 14 days. So I try not to go beyond 2 weeks. Typically it's around, probably averages like every 10 days.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the logistics of it. Like, I made a post saying, like, what do you guys want to see? How often do you? Because it's all about the people at the end of the day. It's what I want to do what the people want. If they want one every week, then I'll do it every week. I think that's probably what I'll do. But I'm not sure about for like a premiere, if I want to do release like 2 in 1, or it's what did you have the kind of same thoughts
Yeah.
as
Oh
that?
yeah.
Or yeah,
I mean,
because I'm just
yeah.
getting advice from different people. So
Yeah, I think my advice would be it would be a good idea to release when because you haven't released anything yet, right?
I've said that I've got the first episode with Terence at Space Coast Tortoise. You know who the second guest is, and obviously you know who the third is because it's you.
Yes, yeah. Are those episodes out? Are they live for people to listen to yet?
They should, or they will be by the time I post this. Yeah, because I've
Okay.
got
Yeah.
the actually no, then I can say, can't I? With Anthony, I've got like 3 hours, 3.5 hours of us just talking and laughing and having a good time. And with Terence, it was maybe an hour, which I've got to add B-roll to make sure the audio is good, that cut out anything that's when the Wi-Fi goes and that kind of thing. And there's just so much to it. And then I was like, for the B-roll, like everything I've taken from his Instagram, do I need to like credit him on his Instagram? And just it's a lot, but it keeps busy, I suppose. I forgot
Yes.
where we
Yeah.
were originally going with
Well,
with that conversation.
if what I would do is I'd probably release I'd probably release 2 or 3 episodes initially, just to give people like a good taste, and then you can
Yeah,
decide if you want to release every week or every 2 weeks or however you want to do that. As far as B-roll, I wouldn't credit every single image. I would just, as long as you had permission from him to use his Instagram, which I'm
yeah, I know.
sure
I
you
always
did.
ask. Yeah.
Yeah, you could do it once, say these images are from there, or just in the description somewhere say that's what I normally do. Photos and whatnot are from the Instagram
Yeah.
page. But yeah, I think it's nice to release a couple at once, just so people they'll listen to the first one and then they won't necessarily, because if maybe it's not another 2 weeks, then they might forget about it or whatever it is. It's good to give them like
True.
2 good
Yeah,
ones in a
you get
row.
them, gripped. Like
Yes,
we want the next one. The people demanding no,
exactly.
that's what I was sort of going for. Just generally, but it's the well, I guess when we finish recording, I can tell you a couple of things, but
Sure.
your posts about like mental health and how animals help mental health,
Mm.
I think that's the reason I first messaged you, and I was like, oh my god, I relate to this so much.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's not talked about that much as far as I know. That's why I was so like wanted to reach out to you and say like, this is great, like this is such a good thing to talk about, because it's just like, I don't think I've ever heard it talked about in detail like that before, that you have to get up and help your animal, or just with frogs have to have daily water well, a lot of things have to have daily water changes, and as bad as I'm feeling, I know I have to do that because otherwise they'll suffer. And it's
Yes.
like, if I'm not feeling mentally well enough to do it for myself, I know that I will always have them to give me that, because I don't have like a dog, and I mean my cats kind of look after themselves. But what made you want to talk about like someone's mental health and the effect that their animals, sort of reptiles, have on it?
Well, from the beginning of doing the show, one of my goals with the podcast itself, like from day one, was just discovering whether or not keeping reptiles in captivity is even ethical. So that we
Yeah.
look at it like, should we be doing this? And some of the things that obviously we've talked about already, which is making sure that they have high level of welfare and that we're caring for them properly, that helps to make sure that the animal is doing well. But one of the things I noticed very shortly after starting is that the
Got a question now.
the res- the response of what's that? Oh yeah,
The
yeah, yeah.
question, I just thought you said that,
Yes,
so it just made me, I think we've done most of them, but yeah, sorry, do continue.
yes, exactly. So there obviously is some ethical considerations. Like should we be have basically quote unquote wild animals in captivity? Is there any benefit to doing that, or is it just purely like a selfish enterprise? Like I want to do it, so I'm going to do it. Now I think there are many benefits for animals keeping them in captivity, but you have to make sure that the animal has a high level of welfare. If the animal doesn't have good welfare, then it's sort of the argument gets destroyed. So if you do have an animal that you're willing to commit to, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Are we good? I think we're
I'm
good.
gonna have to improve. My Wi-Fi is supposed to be like super fast Wi-Fi, so I'm gonna have to ring them and be like, guys, sort this out,
Yeah,
because I pay
fix
I
this.
pay
Yeah,
more than,
yeah. No,
otherwise I'll
it's all
go with
good.
someone else.
I think we're good now,
Yes.
though.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, cool.
Pick up
Yeah,
from.
yeah. So if you have an animal that you're willing to commit to, and that you've made sure that the welfare is high, and you've also committed to improving the care as you can down the road, that's great. I think there are actual benefits to doing that. Giving someone the connection to nature, I think, is really important, especially as our world becomes more and more industrialized. B, it's a really good
Nature.
opportunity for education and to interact with people. I mean, a lot of times people's first interaction with wildlife is through a pet, and how many biologists, veterinarians, and so on were inspired by working with pets as a child, and then
Mm.
went on to do something very important for the animal world. Um, Another thing that's really important is with the high level reptile keepers, a lot of really good actual scientific information can come from there. There's tons of examples of people breeding animals in captivity for the first time in a private setting. We're not talking about a zoo or the university. We're talking about someone who is a
Yeah.
very high level keeper in their basement, discovering something about a species that's never been known. So there is a contribution to the scientific literature that happens inside
Conservation,
herpetoculture.
preservation. Back
Exactly.
to Anthony again. I don't know if you've seen what he's been doing recently, but he's been breeding some of the most rare, turtle species that are critically endangered, and for the first time in captivity for some of the species, which is phenomenal. It's
Exactly.
it's amazing. It's we're helping to save an entire species from going extinct. Like that's a pretty big achievement.
Totally. Exactly. So those sort of things are very beneficial. But the other one that's more keeper centric is that I've always been attuned to is this sense of responsibility that the keeper has with keeping animals. And that can
Of
be
course,
so
yeah,
crucial. So you have a person, like you said, if you're dealing with some mental distress, whether it's, you know, depression or anxiety or just general procrastination or ADHD, those sort of things, having the responsibility of an
I'm all
animal
of
you do.
those. Yeah,
Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about. Like the
of course,
responsibility of
yeah,
having the animals can be it can be incredibly beneficial for those individuals because it gives you something to do. And it's very easy to sit on the couch and scroll when you have all of those things because the
yeah,
weight of everything is it's just like suddenly you weigh 1,000 pounds and you can't get up off the couch and you just could scroll for 4 hours and you don't feel better. But if you know you have things to do in your reptile room, you have to change waters, you have to do some misting, you have to do some feeding, it gives you some inertia. It forces you up, it gets you walking, it
great word.
gets you doing things with your hands. And suddenly now you're interacting with your day in a positive way. And I guarantee you go spend half an hour in your reptile room doing things. You're probably not going to immediately go back to scroll on the couch. You may just go, okay, no, I do need to go get the mail. I do need to run to the
Yeah,
store
you
to buy
might.
some
Yeah,
groceries.
you might. Even if it's just something simple like making your bed or something like
Exactly.
that. I always make sure every single, excuse me, every single day when I wake up, I'm like, if you make your bed, and if you don't manage to achieve anything else today, at least you've made your bed. I think that's quite a good thing to have just as a baseline, and obviously, disclaimer, if you need help with your reptiles, if your mental health is struggling, please, of course, ask for help. There's nothing shameful about asking for help, and if you do ultimately need to surrender your animals because unfortunately it's too much for you to cope with, then there's people like myself that you can talk to who have done that before, and I have had to, and it's very hard. I always say it's a very hard thing for me to admit because now all of my animals are up to high standards. They weren't always when I first started.
Yeah.
And I, because my mental health was bad, and I I wouldn't necessarily use the word selfishly, but I sort of put my feelings before to the instant gratification of wanting to get a new animal, and then it just became overwhelming. But you're always going to get haters, you're always going to get people that are going to judge you for that. And I think, as again, I just tell myself, you can't change the past. You can do the present and the future, and you can help people avoid the same, because it did have an impact on me, because I love them, but they weren't getting what they needed, and it was absolutely heartbreaking, to give up some, well, all of ones that I had to. This wasn't recently, just FYI. But yeah, it did break me for a bit.
Hmm.
And it's very easy to, if your mental health is suffering, to fall. It's a slippery slope. Um, but yeah, if anyone needs to talk, my DMs are always open. If it's been a particularly busy time, like it is recently, I might not sort of reply straight away because I do need time away. It's very difficult when you're kind of a selfless person, because I see that someone needs me, or an animal needs help, or this or that, and I will feel that I have to reply straight away, or I don't want to leave anybody unanswered. But I do need to take care of myself as well.
Yeah.
It's hard, and especially I think as I gain more of a following, and there's more people to help, and the more demand for you know people messaging me and needing help or whatever, I need to learn that I don't need to reply straight away. I don't need to hold other people up, set myself on fire so to keep other people warm,
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, no, mental health issues are a big. I sort of went off on a sort of tangent-y rant there, like I classically do. But yeah, I it's yeah, it was a, I don't know, it just meant a lot to me. Like when I saw that post, I don't know why. It just, when I saw it, I was like, yeah, that's how I feel. It just
Yeah.
it makes you realize how much they help you as well,
Exactly.
and how much they really do mean to you. Of course, they're like living creatures, and you love them with all your heart, but how they do sometimes ultimately saving you from being worse off. I'm not exactly sure how to word it, but I think you know what I mean. Um, in life, and potentially putting yourself in harm's way um, at some stages. But yeah,
Well,
it's
look,
okay to ask for help.
not having responsibility is a very bad thing. And it can lead you down a very bad path because you have no direction, you don't have anything to do, and nothing is relying on you. And that can be a scary place. So having some animals definitely does that. Like you said, having a network, that's why it's good to have a network of people, because if you do end up in a position where you're not able to care for your animals, you want to be able to get some help. People that are local to you, obviously that's the easiest. People who are maybe your local reptile keepers that can take a couple animals or all your animals off your hands if needed. Obviously you want to avoid that, so you want to maintain a
Of
collection
course.
that even
Yeah.
in your but typically people learn this the hard way, because you learn how many too many animals is when it's too late. And so that's why it's good to try to get in front of that story and help people realize, okay, like maybe 5 animals is good, you don't need to do any more, because you want to picture yourself kind of in your worst mental state or your most busiest
Yeah.
time. What can you manage during those? You don't want to be like, I can handle when I'm operating at 100% and I'm mentally happy and I'm mentally well and I have free time, I can easily care for 30 animals. Well, that's not your starting point. You can't
Yeah,
start with
exactly.
that.
That's not your average day. Yeah.
Exactly. So you need to actually start with your worst day, your worst week. What are you going to be able to manage? And then from there, then you have your animals that are your responsibility, and you can care for them that way. It can be tough because people typically with mental health issues, the 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 pleasure of the dopamine spike of buying a new animal is incredibly strong, and you have to be
Especially if it's a
careful.
rescue. Especially
Yes.
if it's a rescue.
Yep.
That was my downfall. It
Because you
was,
want to help.
I need help. I want to feel rescued. I'm gonna put those emotions into this rescue animal. And yeah, but it's as hard as it is for me to admit, going through it personally, as long as I've changed and I've learned from it, going through it personally is sort of, I always say, like, sympathy is one thing, but empathy is another. If you've
Yes.
truly
Yeah.
been in that situation, um, and know how horrible it is, then you can help others avoid it. And yeah,
Yeah. Exactly.
I've I feel like you were going somewhere else, but I forgot what it was.
Um, I think that was it. So yeah, I guess just to summarize, making sure that you're not biting off more than you can chew, making sure that you are very careful with this dopaminergic cycle that is easy to get stuck into of buying new things. I mean, you could do this with any type of thing. It doesn't have to be an animal. It's very easy to get addicted to purchasing things, considering how easy it is to do it. There's an added layer when the things you're buying are living beings, and you need to make sure that you're not overwhelming yourself. So that goes back to part of the conversation earlier. Enjoyment from keeping reptiles can really come from improving their welfare of the ones you already have, making a new enclosure, going out and spending some money, buying new lights or getting new decor, whatever it is. So if you feel the urge to want to buy a new animal, it's nice to be able to thwart it over to say, hey, I have this corn snake here. what can I do with this? Maybe I should go spend some time on iNaturalist or looking at some of the pictures of the natural habitat in the United States and trying to figure out how I might make this thing look different and give more opportunity to that animal. As soon as you start working down that path, it feels the exact same as buying a new animal. It's just
you
as
forget
exciting.
about the initial, initial urge, and you're like, oh, I'm glad, because it's all about managing the feeling of the impulse, and because it can be really strong, and
Totally.
it can, it's so easy just to be, obviously it's harder to distract yourself and work through the urges than it is to easily just be like, it's kind of like quitting smoking, isn't it? You get the, you're like, oh, I want a cigarette. And I think in most cases, like, studies have shown that after, was it 10-15 minutes or something like that, that you get over the initial want for it. So
Yes.
it's a pretty bad example, but it's
actually it's actually a good example, because it's sort of the same process. Like you have all sorts of mind, like there's a bunch of different people living in your head, and one of them really wants to go out and buy a new snake. And if you just give it the time to like let yourself feel that, but also know that you don't have to follow through with that impulse, and just let it sit, and then it'll go away. And there's a deep satisfaction of improving a care of the animal that you already have, and then you get to watch it interact with this, as opposed to going out and buying a new animal. You get that dopamine hit, you're super excited, but then I find this anyway, when I walk into my reptile room, there's like a baseline anxiety that I now have a new animal with new expenses, and I'm gonna have to build a new enclosure and buy new
even if it's
lighting. And
subconscious,
exactly,
you've
it's
got
just
it in there
there.
in the back of your head, like, oh, I really shouldn't have done, like, why?
Yeah.
Ooh. And then that just
You feel
stresses you
dirty
out
after.
more.
Yes. Yeah.
It stresses you out more, because now you feel guilty, now you feel angry at yourself. It's frustratingly just the feelings that you completely forget about with the urge. It's not something that you consider. So hopefully this will help people to sort of be like, oh, I feel that way, maybe I can do those techniques. Like, I remember what Alex said about cigarettes and
Yes,
how it will
exactly.
go, and how it's even with a decoration, or I've got things like little dinosaurs in with the with some of them, or I don't know, a toad sculpture that they can climb on, or just something, and you'll look at that and go, oh, that looks like, look, they're climbing on the toad sculpture, instead of, I should have done that. Like,
Exactly.
it's so much better than, and it's it's just a lot better overall for you mentally. So don't forget, if you are struggling, you got this.
But it's true. You just allow yourself to feel it. You don't have to act on it, and it will go away. And then you can avoid all that like guilty feeling of knowing that you probably shouldn't have bought a new animal.
Yeah, enjoy whatever their new decor or item, hides, branches, wooden, whatever. Enjoy that, and you will enjoy it, if not more. Well, certainly more in the context of, if you can't handle another animal, the relief you will feel is just, it's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your passion with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. Is there anything else that you'd like to share that we haven't covered? And if not, where can our listeners sort of connect with you, follow you online?
Yeah, I think we covered pretty much everything. As I always say, the concept of the most important thing with keeping reptiles is committing to progressing your care and looking for new ways to improve the welfare of the animals that you have. And so if you can do that, I think you're doing a great job. As far as the podcast, if you want more of this type of conversation, the conversation that Alex and I had today is very similar, reminiscent to the types of conversations I have on the podcast with people. You can
Highly
find
recommend.
Yeah, thank you. Animals at Home, you can find it anywhere on Spotify, Apple, YouTube. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, just search Animals at Home, search it on Google, it'll pop up, and you'll be able to listen to episodes. There's over 200 episodes at this point, so there's really a lot to get through if you're a new listener. So hopefully it can keep you entertained for the next Reptile Room chore day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's great. It's good. I can again recommend it just for, you know, getting stuff done, or just having just sort of like a friendly, interesting conversation, educational conversation to have in the background. So, well, I also do have another question. Will you be
Sure.
back? Will you be back on the podcast?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, I would love to be back.
Yay! Yay!
Absolutely.
Cool. Thank you. So, to all our listeners, be sure to tune in next time for more fascinating conversations about all things animals. And until then, take care and stay wild.
Bye.